Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of JumpStart-U. I'm Brian Sykes, just half of the JumpStart duo. Don't worry, you're going to catch Trish later in the show. We're excited to share what you're getting ready to watch or listen to if you happen to catch us on the podcast. It's a recording of our brand and marketing introduction workshop. While our focus is on founders of early stage companies and accelerators, incubators, seed funds, etc., this particular episode is jam-packed with great content that can be a help to any business. So if you want, pause the episode right here and go run and grab an ink pen and paper because we're getting ready to deliver some impactful information for you and your business. Enjoy this episode of JumpStart-U by AdJourney, hosted by me and my lovely wife Trish. We'll see you on the other side.
Real bad boy. I've got a ton of gravel in my shoes, world on my shoulder, a heart full of blues. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt.
This is the free branding and marketing introduction workshop. And my goal for this is something I found as a need is the early stage companies, because a lot of these guys typically, they're wearing a lot of hats right at the get-go. They have a great idea. They've got a passion for what they're trying to accomplish. But a lot of the small businesses who are in that early stage trying to figure things out are missing some core pieces. And one of those core pieces that I find is going to be in the branding side of things. And so that's really what the focus about this is, how the two, branding and marketing, are going to work together, and then how to actually employ them in your business endeavor. Now, this is a 1-hour class. I have produced multiple classes that are more in depth. Let me jump into my slides here. As you'll see from this slide, this is Trish and I, and we're always out and about, and typically I've got a camera in hand. But we've got three different ventures that are happening. One is this neon orange guy on looks like a walk sign. This is my AdJourney logo, and AdJourney is celebrating its 23rd year in business. But as of July this year, when I hit my 23rd year, like I mentioned before, I've been doing teaching on the side forever. And I've had my kids say, you should do teaching. And actually consulted for a college class that our daughter's boyfriend was taking. And everybody in the class was like, okay, you should definitely be a teacher. You're bringing more to it than our teachers are. So I kept thinking about that, and I put it off. And I said, well, no, this is actually a valuable place. I think it could be an asset. So AdJourney has been, I'm using the word transmogrified. And this comes from my generation of Calvin and Hobbes. And there was this series of episodes of Calvin and Hobbes where Calvin had a little box, wrote transmogrifier on the side of it, wrote what he wanted to be changed into, turned the knob, got inside, and he pops out as something brand new. So that's kind of the idea of this business, is I've taken a marketing agency and turned it into an educational platform. The second business I launched this year is Headspace Branding, because I wanted to take the parts of what I did in AdJourney that I enjoyed, apart from the teaching, and focus on the thing that can make the biggest, most practical impact with the least amount of initial work, and that is branding. And so you're going to get really a quick introduction to some of the processes that we actually use when we're engaging with clients. And so even though this is a brand new business, it's not brand new in what it's been doing. I've actually done this stuff for 2 decades now. And at the bottom of the list, you see JumpStart-U. This is an endeavor, part of the education part that Trish and I were doing while running the marketing agency, which is, there's so many things I want to share with people. So we created a podcast that's starting today, will be its second season, starts today. The second season, we're actually going to introduce a lot more in video. So every one of our podcasts are going to be both an audio version and a video. Okay, I'm putting all that out there because I wanted to give you a framework with what is coming to the table. This is not just I read a whole bunch of stuff and now I want to share it with you, but this is what I do. And this is what we do. And hopefully this can be just a huge asset to you guys. Anyway, let's get underway. So I'd like to tell you what I want to do and kind of the goals. So the workshop goals or takeaways are 6 things. The first is I want to give you some clarity of terms. And I love having words that actually have some meat to them and that we can leverage. So I want to start with giving you some clarity in terms. Number 2 is we're going to talk about the branding importance. And this is really where Trish and I are going to start having a lot more conversation in this space. Number 3 is branding core. This is where the workshop comes into play, because what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through a basic structure that we use with clients for building the core of understanding your brand.
It'll be very stripped down.
Yes, very stripped down. But it's a great takeaway because this is going to give you some feet for what you're trying to do. Number 4 is understanding your audience. This is the thing that most businesses, I would say, I would even put it somewhere in the 80 to 90% of businesses don't fully understand their audience. And I'm going to show you a structure and a framework for how to do this. This is what I've done for clients in the past, and it makes it so much simpler because instead of throwing words in the sky, hoping they actually stick, you're having conversations with the people that you're trying to reach. So it's very, very practical. Number 5 is communicating effectively. And underneath this, you see it says marketing's purpose. Okay, so marketing's purpose. This is, if you want to strip down idea of what marketing is all about, it's this. It's communicating effectively with your target audience, with the idea of growing business, of getting people to buy your and use your products and services. We'll get into that a little bit more so that you can have something as a frame of reference to work from. And then number 6 is leveraging your brand story. And this, I've got job description. I want to come to this later. I don't want to jump into this because I'll get carried away. And I'm having to limit myself as I'm expressing things. And Trish knows my challenge in teaching is I've got this plethora of information. I'm a little bit ADHD. And when I get turned loose, it's sort of like rabbit. And I just kind of go after this thing wide open. So
if you see me lean over, it's because I'm squeezing his knee like, okay.
Let's bring this back home. Okay, so let's actually jump into the class and get something from it. Again, feel free to pause me, throw up your hand, come on the microphone, and let's engage. Clarity of terms. I want to start with the most practical thing, since this is a class on branding and marketing, is starting with the term branding. So the first question in this space is, what is it? Now, before I go into my actual slides here, what do you guys think is a good definition, or what would you think, how you might yourself at this moment define branding? Now, feel free to come off your mute on this one.
I would say it's awareness of your product or service.
Okay, that's pretty good. Caitlin, what do you think?
I would say something like a catchy explanation of what you do.
Okay. I like a little bit of both of what you guys have to offer, and that's actually got a little more meat on it than what a lot of people would say. So fantastic. I'm going to simplify this for you and give you something that's going to help out. So my approach to this is I'm going to start with what it isn't. So branding, what is it? Well, let's start with what it's not. Branding is not a logo. A logo is simply a symbol for the brand. A lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of marketers refer to your brand as your logo, and that's simply not the case. The logo becomes emblematic for what you're all about. So your brand, as a lot of people refer, they'll use that word interchangeably with logo. They're really only talking about the symbol or the element, the visual element that people might know. But
when I hear branding, I think about branding cattle or.
Right. And actually, that's a great point. So we'll come into that one in just a second. Branding, it's not a product. So a product is an offering of the brand. It's the goods, ideas, or services a brand provides. And that's not what a brand is either. So the brand is not the logo, and the brand is not the product. Branding is not a promise. Now, this was something that was really popularized in the 90s and early 2000s. But branding is not a promise. While a brand ends up acting on its promise made to its clients, A brand is not a promise either. Again, these are elements of what a brand is, but it's not what the brand itself is. Popularized because of social media and the digital age, branding also is not impressions. A lot of digital advertisers present that branding is impressions. It's how many times your product or your brand gets seen as what branding is, but it's not that either. Okay. This is a quotation by Marty Neumauer, and he said, "A brand is a result. It's a customer's gut feeling about a product, a service, or a company. It's in their heads and in their hearts. A brand is your reputation." Okay. Notice the one word I've got on here that's really highlighted is the word reputation, because that's what branding is reputation development management. Okay. So branding importance. This is the second point on our list here. A brand is your reputation. I'm going to keep that there, but look at what a couple other people have said. Jeff Bezos, of course, you know of him. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Tom Goodwin, he said brands are essentially patterns of familiarity, meaning, fondness, and reassurance that exist in the minds of people. Again, it's all about the reputation. And then Seth Godin, he's one of my favorite. I love his podcast. He says a brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. So again, a brand is your reputation. That kind of changes things a little bit.
Something I just noticed through these is that all of those are the positive portion, the positive spin on a positive impression behind or a positive reputation. The brand's power is actually can work both ways. A powerful negative impression is not good.
Right.
Excuse me.
So you mentioned earlier, Trish, about branding related to cattle, and we just had this conversation earlier this week.
Yeah.
So when you think of the idea of a brand where a cow or a farm animal has been marked, the mark or the logo or the impression is not just the mark that's on the cow. In other words, when you see, not that we're farmers, but if you were a farmer and you were to see a cow that's got a mark and you associated that mark with a particular farm or a person that owned these cattle, then the way the cow looks, its state of health, the location that this cow is raised in, whether it's nice lush fields or sitting in dirt all day long.
The location it's found in.
Right. Mm-hmm. So all of those things kind of touch on the brand for that cow. So we tend to think of the brand as the mark itself sometimes, or the cow, but it's really the entire story, the reputation that's built around this item, around this thing. Mm-hmm. Marty Neumauer went on to say also, brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is, and they being the public. Now, why do I bring up Marty Neumauer? Because several of his books are top business books, but his book, Zag, which is a fantastic book, I highly recommend it, is one of the top 100 business books of all time. He's a great guy. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. He's still active and alive and kicking. And he puts some really good stuff out there. So I recommend, if you want to jump into some great books on marketing and branding, his book, Zag, is fantastic when it comes to marketing and branding. His book, Brand Gap, it's like a textbook on how to do effective branding. Anyway, here's some really good things that he's put together that I think you would enjoy. And if you're wanting to know what your creative skills are, the Meta Skills book is really fascinating. He's actually got you can do a Google search and find Meta Skills, and there's a simple little test that'll show you how you're weighted in your creative skills. Just kind of a fun guy. But Marty Neumauer. Okay. So we understand the idea. We've got a definition now for branding, but I want to take a look at branding core, and what it says here is, now let's talk about your brand. There's some keywords that I want you to be familiar with. And these are things that what we typically do with the client is we have them come up with 3 to 5 words that describe each of these elements. So as we're starting, the first one we come across is culture. Okay, so with culture, the definition of this is how might customers and employees describe your business? This is an important concept because what we're talking about here is, again, brand is what they say it is. So a key part of they, in this case, is your customers and those who are employees of a brand. So you want to start with the culture, and what you're looking for is not sentence descriptions. These are literally 1 and 2 word statements that define the thing. And you're looking for creative, colorful words that give you more information. It's got meat to it. So our first word is culture.
I'd like to point out too that a place that this is missed often that I've found is in the employees.
Yeah.
You want to make sure your internal brand story is so crisp and clear that the employees live it, breathe it, feel it, can spout it if anyone asks. And that's where a lot of employers or companies miss the mark. They've got their target audience nailed down as far as the story they're wanting to tell and the reputation they're trying to build. But if your employees they're not clear on it, you're doing 10 times the work.
Exactly. And this is something interesting because Trish is absolutely right. We've gone into several different meetings where when you're engaging with the people, the owner typically has a pretty good idea of what he's trying to accomplish. Maybe the sales manager, they've got an idea of what they're trying to accomplish, but they're not synced. They're not together on this thing. And so this is really important to kind of nail this down. And this is a part of the branding initiative that you need to do. It's not just about creating a reputation in the sense of let's get the logo right and make sure our colors are matching and that, the vehicles in the building and business cards. That's a piece of it. A really core part of this is the culture that you build within a business that then establishes the brand. You think of Apple, you think of Nike, any of these products that are well established as brands, they have a defined culture that people could put a finger on and say specifically that's what that is. Now, here's the challenge is a lot of times small businesses think brands, this is not that important. Why would I even bother with this? But this is actually the core of you as a business. If you don't get this nailed down, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy in the long run. The next brand attribute is customer. Now, I'm going to spend a lot more time on this in just a little bit. But in this space, we're looking for keywords that define how would you describe your ideal customer? So how would you describe your ideal customer? The next brand attribute is voice. How do you sound to others? Now put this in mind or in relation to think of an individual, a person. If you pick a person in your mind, somebody that has value to you as an individual, think about their attributes as an individual. What does their voice sound like? And I don't mean just the words that they say, the inflections they might use, but everything about the nuances of how they communicate. When you think of a brand, the way humans engage with things is we personify things. We do it with our dog. We can't take the dog for a walk without giving them a voice. And the reason is because it's how we engage with things, with things that we're trying to associate or connect with. So when it comes to brands, one of the things we do is we create a voice for that brand. And that voice is based off of the perception, the reputation, the idea that we've developed around that brand. If you are the brand, the business owner, then it's really important that you control the voice that you communicate with. So this is the thing here is how do you sound to others? Probably even more important is how do you want to sound? Because you need to begin focusing and communicating in a way that your voice is staying consistent in that way. Another brand attribute is feel. And I'm Southern born, and I have to really concentrate to say this without putting a long E on feel, but feel. How does a customer feel when using your product or your service? This is really important. It's not just about did the product or service accomplish the job, because that's just a rudimentary problem solved, solution gained, but it's an easy pass over. Are you in the delivery of the product or service accomplishing some pain point so that you're moving people in a direction that makes them feel a certain way. This is a valuable attribute for creating the culture and the identity of a brand, is by controlling the feeling associated with it. Okay, so these are some words that you might be thinking, oh, this is so ooey gooey and it feels mushy. You know, this is not what we're all about. But people associate with brands in this way. And so for your brand, how do you feel? Or how does your customer feel? Another brand attribute is impact. What do you tangibly deliver? What difference is made because of you or your brand in the life of the customer? Okay, so this is a really valuable piece. We've talked about the touchy-feely stuff, but then there's an actual transaction of a product or service purchase, the use of it, they review it, but then what did you actually accomplish in their life? I've got a good friend that owns a plumbing business, a very successful plumbing business. I think he's got about 50 employees now. And in this plumbing business, one of the things that I've talked with him about is what he delivers is not just, you know, a P-trap on a sink or, you know, PVC piping that runs underneath the house. The consumer doesn't always see the details and how something's done, how it's delivered in that sense. They're not looking at how you go about doing these things necessarily. What is the end result for the plumber? It's a job done well. In the case of him coming to the house, if he were to do some work here, one of his employees would come by and fix a sink or fix a toilet. Then what he's done is he's removed the burden of the frustration that was there when it wasn't working. And so what he tangibly delivers is normalcy back to life. So think of, in relation to your product and the service that you offer, what is it, the end result? Not just the product and service that's delivered in the sense of a physical product or service, but what happens because you've done this thing.
Right. Like, where does the needle move for the customer?
Right. And a lot of times, you know, there's a pain. I could spend way too much time in this space, but I'll go in this direction just for a second. When it comes to mowing a yard, our youngest two mowed yards for several years, and they have a mowing business. And, you know, for one thing, what is the motivation that somebody would hire some children to come mow their yard? The easy thing is they don't want to do it themselves. That's an obvious. But there's a place where there's a measure of discomfort if that yard just keeps on growing and they don't want to do it themselves. There's also the measure of they don't want to get a bad reputation with their neighbors. They don't want to have that dis-ease with how that makes them look. So there's some things you can touch on that's emotional movers that makes people do things. And this is where you can kind of touch on that impact.
And those kind of clients also were looking to, as a part of their solution, they were finding, wanted to invest in a story.
Yes.
You know, they really wanted to support that young people were getting out and doing what, you know, so many young people aren't doing anymore. And they wanted to be a part of a story where they're saving up for their first car. And,
right.
You know, they wanted to step into that story as characters and players in the story.
Yeah. And so by doing that, they actually, as far as the young people in the area, they had probably the highest prices for mowing and had a consistent client list, and because people liked what they were about. And then the follow-up is they also did a fantastic job, which then built a reputation for, you hire them, they're going to do what they say they're going to do. And then of the brand attributes, the last one is the X factor. Now, this is where you can kind of have fun, because what makes you special? What is the thing about the brand that stands it apart from everybody else who's in this same category? This is where you can be a little creative. You know, all the other attributes are really specific and they kind of nail down in regards to everybody that's, you know, needs a plumber. They're going to have some of the same problems. But the X factor side of things is, what is it that you do, or what is it that you deliver, or how do you bring, you know, your product or service in such a way that makes you stand out? This is, I think of my son, Matthew. He just ordered a visor for his football helmet, and the company that he ordered from was Sleeves. I never even heard of them before, but when the product came, they could have put it in a very simple bag, put it in a box, shipped it through Amazon, no big deal. But what they did is you get an outside package that was just a black bag, and it had been printed with gray. It looked nice and clean. So you tear that off and you come to a box about a shoebox size, and it was imprinted with black ink and a more muted gray, so it's almost disappearing. It's getting more refined. You open that up, and inside of that is another box. And this box is very sleek. It's matte black, and instead of it being printed with letters, it's printed with a gloss. So all the graffiti style font for sleep is written all over the box. The presentation was it's just like you were going through Christmas presents, getting to the nicer gift. And then the final is, once you got inside of that, was a mesh bag with a little drawstring, and the product was inside with all the information that was needed. So fantastic presentation. For me, the X factor was the experience that delivered what could have been just a basic product, and they made it feel special.
And now, does the X factor always have to be the thing? Because this is two examples I'm thinking of now. An X factor can be the thing that closes the first sale, but not always.
Right.
Sometimes it's part of when someone has decided to go with you that will bring you back or leave an impression of specialness above and beyond. Like the boys leaving the dipped, the hydro dipped bases behind. Nobody hired them because of that.
Right.
But it was something special that they finished their mowing jobs with that made people come back.
Yes.
So
yeah.
X factor is sometimes after the sale.
It can be after the sale. It can be before. It's really the thing that's going to make you stand out, and finding a way to have this, finding a way to be able to engage in this space. Now, we collected all of these words: culture, customer, voice, feel, impact, and X factor. And all of those words then can be used to create a brand description. In other words, the first blank is business name, provides whatever the product or service is to a specific kind of customer in a certain kind of culture environment with a certain kind of voice, helping them feel, and then you bring in your word, and impact and impact. Now, from that list of 3 to 5 words you've chosen for each of these things, you're going to select one. What this is going to do for each category of culture, customer, voice, we've chosen the one that's most pertinent to the brand that you've identified with, the thing that you feel best represents you.
This is a lot of work, by the way. This looks really simple. But when you really sit to this and try to be objective about yourself, it's many times easy to do for someone else because you can be objective. But when this is your baby, it gets really complicated. It's kind of like trying to pick one of your favorite children. You can't do that. So this is gritty work here. This is something that does take time and a lot of deep work.
Yeah, this is not something you're going to knock out in an hour. This is something that you're going to spend days on, thinking through and gaining a good sense of who you are, asking other people questions to get a sense of things. Also, you might have an idea in your head of, how does my ideal customer describe me? You might spend some time thinking about that and come up with this long sentence, and you're like, how can I narrow that down to one word? That gets really tricky. And this is the thing that actually brings a lot of clients to want to hire us to engage, because once they start in this path, they're like, okay, I tried it and I'm really running into a wall.
Yeah, the objectivity is a big deal. And then having outside eyes that are at a pro level that can show you where you're missing the mark, which sometimes they can find, well, this is exactly what I want all of these words to be. But when I ask other people, they're not getting it. I'm not speaking the right language because this isn't what I'm conveying. How do I change that? That's the big questions. They're so locked in because they've already decided what they want to be is what they already are, that it's really hard to know how to move that around to get it right.
Right. Okay. Before we go forward, we just got a few more tabs to really get through. Are there any questions from you guys over anything we've covered so far? Because we throw a whole bunch of meat and potatoes at you. A lot of things to kind of take in. Any questions where we're at right now?
None from me yet.
Okay.
No, I would say I'm good and really impressed with everything that's going on.
Good, good. Well, this next part is going to be a lot of fun. Let me see. Okay, so with the next part is understand your audience. We spent a good bit of time talking about brand attributes and kind of nailing things down. And I'm looking at the time and I realize we've done it again. I'm going to apologize on the front side because this is the way I try to give so much value. A question you need to ask yourself is, who are your customers? Now, before we said, what do your customers think about you? That's great. That's an important part of your brand. But when it comes to branding and then engaging in that space, you have to understand who are your customers. Now, I'm going to start with a super rudimentary, basic breakdown of how to look at your customers.
Can I say one of the number one things I think is the problem out of the gate when someone asks themselves this, especially as a new or burgeoning business, and I made this mistake too, is if you ask me that, I am like, whoever will purchase, close. And that, it burns out fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you get so desperate for closing or selling that you're so unfocused. It's like a sprinkler instead of a power washer, and it will burn you out really quickly if you think your customer is anybody who will buy your stuff. Like, that's not it.
We actually had a consultation with a group, and it was funny because at the wrap up, and we're talking about understanding their customer, this one guy, he makes custom soaps. Mm-hmm. Really nice, interesting thing. And so we're like, okay, so who's your customer? He's like, everybody's my customer because everybody needs soap. But
we've got some work to do.
Yeah. But the problem in that mindset is if you go to the grocery store and you go to the soap aisle, you'll notice that there's a lot of other options out there in the soap category. And this is what we tried to express to him. If they're already buying from that, what's going to convince them to use you over them? So you got to understand who the people are that are willing to pass all the competition to purchase from you. And so this is why understanding the demographics, the customer's backstory, the customer's needs and why, and then exceed their needs is how can you go above and beyond to really make them happy? Okay, this is an example of a customer profile booklet that I did for a client. And I'm going to actually walk you through what we put into here and then give you a sense of how to use this for yourself. Okay, this is an example of one customer. They actually had a breakout of 6 primary customer types or profiles. This is Active Andy. And with Active Andy, we've got a whole breakdown of what to know about this client and what's important. The thing is it's not good enough just to say, my customer's retired. That's not our target audience. That's too broad. We need to niche it down and get very specific about who is going to be this target audience. And so this audience, I've called them actively retired. I'm saying it's the 65 and older, which is 19% of the population. And then I went through and I broke out attributes. Let me actually show you. The first is I humanize them. In other words, give them a name. Don't just say actively retired or this person that's retired. Let it be a human being. Humanize it.
It makes it easier later in your other work for your business and telling your story if you're talking to someone with a name.
Yes.
Because we all personify, like you said earlier. So we're going to personify this piece of paper here.
Right.
And it'll be easier to talk in a more connecting and genuine and organic way to a person.
Right.
Than it would be out to just like a blank space.
This is huge. Just by having a person, even if it's not a real person, but it's an idea. If we've got a person that we're engaging with, it allows us to make it very real when we're engaging. You want to have the demographics, the basics that are important. You want to have a descriptive name, which I've got actively retired. So this is like, how do you narrow down this niche? If you're talking about retired, which kind of retired? In this case, it's actively retired. Then we want a summary. In the case of retired, I'm saying people who have had a long, successful career and are enjoying the golden years with a measure of financial freedom and stability to support their newfound freedom. Notice I got the word freedom is bold in italics because that's the key. That's the priority for this audience. Okay, attributes and keywords. I've got a description of them. And then I've got keywords. Why keywords? This is the words they will use when they're typing and describing what's going on in their life.
And it's the kind of words they'll listen for when it's time to make a decision about who to go with.
Yes. And this is something most businesses, most marketers actually avoid or don't do. But this is so key, especially you think about this. Search engines are simply trying to find the most perfectly relatable solution to the search that you put in. They're trying to connect you to the humans on the other side who are searching for the things that you offer. The best way to do that is to know the language that they're going to use so that you can address your information in a way that touches on what they're searching for. In other words, if I'm looking for the best pizza place that puts pineapple and ham on pizzas, then that's very specific. So if I've got a pizza restaurant, I want to make sure that I'm saying we've got pineapple and ham on our pizza. You want to talk the language of the people who are interested. The other thing is attitudes and pain points. Okay, here's the interesting thing with this. Attitude is what is the motivator in their life. With the active Andy, let me show you what I've said. Getting while the getting is good. They're active and alive, pursuit of missed opportunities to seize life's experiences. Agenda and goal driven. They do not mind work, but willing to pay for services that frees them to pursue work they want, which is volunteering, gardening, hobbies, etc. It's positive. Security is a big issue. Are you going to handle responsibilities with the same level of care I did for up 10 years? And then pain points. Bondage to essential financial concerns that take away from valuable time. Time constraints. Give me freedom, big on money, small on time. And then the solution. So I've taken all of these pieces that break up how I've defined this person, and then I explained the solution. Well, how is it that everyday checks and balances, EDC&B, solves this person's problem? So I said, EDC&B makes their life easy. They feel in control without the hassle of dealing with the day-to-day finances. By managing their finances, they are able to enjoy more independence and entrust the daily tasks to a reliable third party who can act on their behalf.
So this would be like impact.
Yeah. So what we've done is I've taken all these different elements and I've created a person that you can get in your head. You can get an idea what they look like, what they feel like, their problems, the things that they're stressed over. And I can then find a way to engage with them. The next piece is I storyboard it. In other words, I took all that information that I compiled before and I actually write it out as a story. In this case, actively retired quotation. The trouble with let me try that again. The trouble with retirement is that you never get a day off. Abe Lemons. And in this, I say Andy and his wife Jan Matz moved to their chosen place of retirement following long careers. And then I go through this whole thing about what they ran into, the problems they faced, and then how EDC&B came in and solved their pain.
You told the story.
I told the story. What's interesting is we actually built this for each of their client profiles, and it was used in their social media. It was used on their website, because what happens then is people can read their story in somebody else's story and be like, yes, I've got that problem. They have it solved here. It allows me then to engage and communicate.
It's sort of like properly staging a house that's on the market.
Yeah.
You want it to be homey enough, but also a clear palette.
Right.
To where someone can connect. They're like, oh, they baked cookies. This smells like my home. That smells like home.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not so covered up in you that they can connect with the person that inhabits, but they aren't overtaken by the person, that they can fit in to that space.
And it's a very challenging thing to do effectively, but it's where you can make the customer the hero of the story. That's what you're ultimately trying to do. And you can give them examples of how other people have been made the hero in their story. So it shows how you can help them. It's sort of like once you've watched Star Wars, you know that Yoda helped Luke Skywalker become a Jedi. So it's sort of like, okay, somebody else who comes along and befriends Yoda, there's a potential there. Yeah, they've got a chance. Okay, communicate them effectively is our next point. The effective speaker realizes the primary purpose of speech is the communication of ideas and feelings in order to get a desired response. I learned this in freshman speech my first year over 30 years ago in college. it's stuck. And this is, to me, a perfect definition for what marketing is all about. I'm going to read that again. The effective speaker realizes the primary purpose of speech is the communication of ideas and feelings. That's two key things that are takeaways here. In order to get a desired response. Okay. In order to get a desired response, everything you need or everything you do needs a job description with a clear goal defined.
So this is something I learned in the last few years that I found interesting. When you talk about a job description, you mean every element of your branding and marketing needs a job.
Yes.
So like a website, you have to have a job description for that website,
Right.
as it almost as if it's an employee.
It is an employee of the business.
I didn't realize that was what that was till a few years ago. And it's so fascinating now to look at every element of your branding and marketing as having an actual job description and putting it to work properly.
And you think about this, if you're not going to be the one who's going to create the website, or if you're not going to be the one who's doing the social media, you need to define what the job description is for that, so that you can clearly say, instead of saying, here's my logo, here's the colors, here's the verbiage, go make something. Now you can specifically say, here's what I want to happen on my website. This is the job that it needs to accomplish. Can you do that? That gives you a very defined parameter with which to work. This is huge.
We're all about getting all the juice you can with one squeeze, right?
Yes.
And so efficiency is huge. So we've worked with so many people who are on their third website designer or their third app builder or their fourth whatever, and they're frustrated because the person delivering that service to them is not getting it right.
Yeah.
But we always look at the business owner and go, well, what did you not communicate clearly?
Right.
Or what did you not hear clearly that they told you they were going to do, and you just weren't having it? You didn't hear that this is going to be a subpar product compared to what my expectations are.
Right. Most problems in business are communication problems. And this is across the board. So if you're not successfully communicating the ideas and feelings in order to get that desired response, you're not being effective. This comes back on us, and we have to own it. This is the part that kind of sucks, because it's no fun to kind of go, okay, it wasn't just them, it's me. So this is something with my children when they did wrong, when I were raising them. The thing was, instead of go, okay, you're just an idiot, what in the world? I'd have to step back and say, okay, how did I not effectively communicate that so that he understands what I'm saying? So anyway, this is something that's really important, and just this is probably the best takeaway I think you can have from this entire class. Okay, and we're wrapping up here. This I'm going to point you to. Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand is a fantastic book. I just finished reading this not too long ago again. And what I liked about it is he talks about how to take and build a story that engages with the customer. Now, everything I've laid out before, if you've nailed down your brand, if you have defined your customer really well, and you've gone through the whole idea of what we talked about, effective communication with the ideas and feelings with a desired response, you're going to do all of these things intuitively, because that's how the story brand is all based around. But I've also created this, and this is too much to kind of go over in one little session.
You built from the book.
Yeah, so I took the workbook, and I went through and I said, okay, I like what he's done. I like his structure, but I created this template where you can go in with a Keynote or with PowerPoint or a PDF and handwrite it, and you can fill out the answers. His structure is really easy. I liked it, but I wanted to put a little more meat behind it so you could understand how to put this in place. So basically a character, and the character is your customer. So the customer profile, understanding who your customer is, if you go back to that and you engage in this space by defining, okay, my customer, Active Andy, what do they want? And you put this here and you pare it down to a simple statement. So the character has a problem. There's a villain, there's an external, internal, and philosophical levels of conflict, and all that stuff's kind of broken down.
This is all about building a very well-written story.
Yes. And with that, it allows you then to have a framework with which to engage and with clients and be able to tell a story that compels and moves where they are.
Is there anywhere they can get this?
Yes. So since you guys attended the class today, I will send you the link for this brand script if you're interested.
It's sort of like a workbook for the book he just mentioned.
Yeah. And again, it's this, the book is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Okay. So follow us and learn. I'm active, as some of you have already found, on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my engagement. We own the two businesses mentioned of AdJourney and Headspace Branding, and I've got the podcast and the newsletter under JumpStart-U.
And that is a wrap. Wasn't that meaty? I certainly hope you got a lot from it. Our next episode will begin this season's interviews, and Trish and I are super excited. We have a full lineup of industry thought leaders and mentors in the incubator space, and we're adding new people every week. Again, this is Brian Sykes. I'm the co-host of JumpStart-U, founder of AdJourney, and founder of Headspace Branding. And until next time, y'all be blessed.